Hello, government seekers. My name is Graham Elwood, coming to you live from the Orange Pill Studios in beautiful San Salvador. This is where I've been doing the Orange Pill podcast with Max Kaiser, and we're just getting the studio tweaked out. It's a little shadowy, but we'll get that figured out. But this is we're trying to get, in the future, we will be able to get the logo for this show behind me. They have this thing that moves around. We can get that done. So thank you, everybody in the chat. Blaze Silverwolf is our moderator, and we're doing a much earlier time than we normally do because we're, I'm in parts unknown. I'm in another country. So this is what's going on right now. So hola, amigas. Gracias. I'm speaking Spanish to the crew. It's fantastic. Thank God for Google Translate. We got to do that today because I was trying to communicate that I'm doing this show at 1 o'clock Central Time, and then we're doing Orange Pill with Max, and we have a guest on. And so my Spanish is getting better, slowly but surely. All right, let's bring them on. We haven't done a show in a couple weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Government Secrets with the two most censored comedians in the world, Lee Cap and Graham Elwood.
Hello, man. You said that. I'm getting a little echo of myself, but
You're getting an echo? Hold on.
Just barely.
Let me see if I can. Let me see where that's coming in.
Testing.
Are you hearing it from me or from you?
No, from me, but I think it might be gone.
Is it gone?
I think we're good. How big is that room? You sound like you're in the warehouse where they produce the shoes that we wear here in America.
It's a huge room. This is a very big, fancy podcast studio, and my surfer necklace just fell off. So that's how big it is.
That's a sign. If you ask a tarot card reader, that is not good.
I think it's a good sign. I think when your puka shell necklace falls off in a Bitcoin podcast studio, it means you're going to have good fortune for the next 7 years.
Is a Bitcoin podcast studio real or is it only online?
Yeah, I now live in the blockchain. I only exist on the internet now, Lee. This is where I exist. So yeah, we have two very different. We used to have both of us had blue backgrounds, and now I have this big background. But
it's pretty cool. You could find, if you could find a sponsor who sells pills, you could put their brand next to the word pill.
Yeah, we should just have some pharmaceutical product, because of course, I sold out to big pharma. Everybody knows that. So
everyone knows that. That's true. God, when do those checks roll in?
I haven't gotten them yet. I don't know. I haven't.
That is so, honestly, that is effed up of them not to send you the big checks.
It really is. I should be getting huge amounts of money, and I'm not. So how is everything in your world?
It's going fine. You're getting me at 2 p.m. I think despite all of our changes, we've almost always been at like 8 to 10 p.m. my time, whether it was here or Sweden or something. So you're getting me hot. This is prime time, all right? This is with energy, fired up, and this is the most sober I've ever been on this show. This is going to be amazing.
I must say there is a little pep in your step. Usually it's like, hey, buddy.
Yeah. Usually you just hear my forehead hit the mic a few times. Yeah.
You're just like, so the CIA did something weird, and you're just like nodding off, drooling on yourself.
How's El Salvador other than the studio?
It's great. So we're in San Salvador, the capital. I'm staying down at the beach, which is about a 40-minute drive. But the surfing's been great. Bukele won on Sunday with 85% of the vote. I mean, and
that's a lot.
It's a lot. And this is the thing that I was talking about this last night on my regular show with Ron Placone. So, Ilhan Omar writes this ridiculous letter saying, election integrity, blah, blah, blah about El Salvador, right? And so this is how they run their elections, which is 10 times better than we do in America. First of all paper ballots, no hackable.
You could actually go and look at what was voted on.
Yes, and they do the thing where they put ink on your fingers so they know, like it's paper ballots, and the election is held on a Sunday when no one's working, so more people can vote, not on a Tuesday when people are working like we do in dumb America. And this other thing, there's no drinking for 3 days, for 72 hours. The 2 days before and the day of the election, there's no drinking. No alcohol can be consumed. No alcohol is sold. No bars are open. It was,
and no one has any alcohol in their houses that they drink on their own.
Yeah.
No one stocks up before the 3 days.
Yeah, like Ramadan, where people just have hidden bars in their home.
Yeah.
But I didn't see anybody like doing that. I was like, well, someone's got to have some booze in their home. I didn't see any of that. And I was driving around on Sunday. I went for a hike, and there was I drove by one polling place kind of up in the hills in a small town. People were lined out the door. It was huge voter turnout. And yeah, there's just like a hope and an excitement in this country.
Well, that's the other thing is in a lot of countries you get like 80, 90% turnout, whereas in the US it's like 50, 60.
Oh, when we get 60% turnout, everyone's like, that's amazing. I'm like, that's a D.
Yeah.
Like if we're
in Australia, they charge you're fined like, I don't know if it's 50 or $100 or something, and they have like 99% turnout.
Yes, it's compulsory. It's compulsory in Brazil as well. You get fined if you don't vote. So
the U.S. doesn't actually want people voting. So
no. That's why, again, like if we were grading our democracy, a 60% turnout would be a D. That means we're just barely passing. We're just fumbling our way through a democracy, and we're supposed to be the bastion of democracy.
I mean, the U.S., we want the D.
We want that deep D, deep D democracy.
Big old D democracy. That's what we want.
Too, like, so Bukele gave this speech Sunday night after he won from the National Palace downtown, and it's packed. And I spoke to Max Kaiser the next day on our Orange Pill podcast, what it was like. He said it was really cool. It was fun. People weren't like drunk or partying, obviously, or anything like that. And he's this young guy. He's like 42. He's in great shape, and he gives this really impassioned speech, and everyone's excited because
I know so little about El Salvador. Is he left wing or?
So he started that. This is, again, tell me if this sounds familiar. When there was two old, entrenched, corrupt parties, and then I know is that have you ever heard of a country that do such a thing? And where they would just kick these various political footballs back and forth, and nothing got done. He was part of a new party called literally the New Ideas Party, Nuevas Ideas, and he won in 2019. It's a 5-year term here with 53% of the vote or 54% of the vote. And then he started making these big changes. And the New Ideas Party now just took 52 or something of 60 seats in their parliament or Senate or whatever it's called. So the New Ideas Party is just winning. And there's even a great example. There was a woman within his party that got caught for some corruption, and he was like, no, he prosecuted her. He didn't like give her a pass or let her slide because she's in his party. And so this new party is the people have voted like overwhelmingly for this party. And that's what happens. I was talking about this with Ron Placone. I go, imagine if Bernie Sanders would have won in 2020 and his first order of business as president of the United States, when he would have been sworn in January of 21, he would have inherited a country that was in the middle of a national emergency, which was COVID. He could have said everybody gets free Medicare for all. He could have just done that. And imagine what his approval rating would be.
Right.
So I mean, I've asked so many El Salvadorians, what do you think of this president? Just asking them. I'm not trying to fish for an answer. And they're all like, oh, he's great. He's awesome. He's locked up the gangs. And even like the one person I talked to that had a little bit of a criticism for him was just like, well, he gambled with Bitcoin. And so I didn't say this to this guy, but I was like, oh, this guy doesn't even understand how Bitcoin works. He just Bukele bought Bitcoin at a certain price, and then when the Bitcoin price dropped, some people were like, "Oh man, he blew all of our money." And it's like, no, the country of El Salvador owns a bunch of Bitcoin. He keeps buying it, so as Bitcoin goes up in price over time, this country will be like Monaco or something. Like it'll just be really wealthy. So I don't. It's really
all right. Enough of your propaganda theories, Graham. Jesus.
I had to. I'm in the Orange Pill studio. I have to weave in some Bitcoin stuff.
I know. We're 3 minutes in, and you're like, everybody buy Bitcoin, and Epstein didn't kill himself. Damn it, Graham.
Well, he didn't, Lee. So yeah, it's pretty cool here. I'm excited. Yeah, I see a lot of hope here. So that's
cool.
I think we should do. I feel like your segment might be more of a downer, or do you think your segment's going to be more of a?
Here's the thing. It does involve millions of people dying of starvation, but I don't plan to describe much of that. So I think it could be hilarious.
Well, I just have a good old-fashioned CIA involvement in Latin America story, just because.
All right, let's go with yours first.
All right. Segment number 1. So I want to talk about the United States occupation of Nicaragua, since the first thing that popped to mind when Ilhan Omar wrote that dumb letter on Twitter was like, hey, why don't you worry about any politician in America that's like critical of another country? It's like, are you aware of what's happening in America today? How you could be helping American citizens today? Oh, and by the way, here's all the times America has interfered with elections. So why don't you be quiet?
Right.
And we've talked a lot about just Latin America in general. We've talked about how America here in El Salvador backed, and we helped make their civil war worse. But I wanted to talk about this is a Wikipedia page again called "The United States Occupation of Nicaragua." It's just front and center.
Even the liberals in the world have admitted this.
Yes. It was from 1912 to 1933 and was part of the Banana Wars, when the U.S. military invaded various Latin American countries from 1898 to 1834. This is also what we reference a lot on this show. But Smedley Butler talks about.
How many times during the Banana Wars, like bullets whizzing by their head, do you think someone shouted, "This is bananas"? Like a lot? Like, what are we thinking?
Do you think this is where the banana split was invented?
Well, that was when a guy was shot in half with a cannon during the Banana Wars.
And they're like, wow, that's a banana split.
Banana split. And then someone went, whackity, smackity doo. Yeah.
Some guy that was eating ice cream went, that sounds like a great idea. And that's how it was born.
That's how it was born, yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me that a fun dessert treat was born out of a horrific war event that America created. The formal occupation began in 1912, even though there were various other assaults by the United States and Nicaragua throughout this period.
I love the idea of a formal occupation. We are officially now occupying you. We've been destroying your life for a while, but we've written it down now.
Yeah, now it's going to be for real. Before we just kind of half made it.
The paper. I'm sorry, I was so behind on my paperwork.
Yeah, it took me forever to file. Washington's backed up. We've been invading countries illegally for so long now.
Do you have any idea how much paperwork's involved?
It's so stacking up in DC, and they're very.
I've told them we should get a stamp for these papers.
Just an occupy. Goot, you've been occupied. Boom.
Boom. Got carpal tunnel signing all these coup documents.
Oh, there's so many coup documents. The
Buku documents, if you will. That had to happen.
This midday Lee camp is on fire. I mean, this
midday Lee camp on fire.
The coffee hasn't worn off. Lee camp is amazing.
Weirdly, I think I sound drunker, but I think it's more fun.
You do. Yeah. You absolutely sound drunker. The American military interventions in Nicaragua were designed to stop any other nation except the United States from building the Nicaraguan Canal. Oh, well, weird. It was all about money and commerce. Shocker. Nicaragua assumed a quasi-protectorate status under the 1916 Bryan-Camaro Treaty. President Herbert Hoover opposed this relationship. On January 2nd, 1933, Hoover ended the intervention. But let's go into the whole thing. So there was the Estrada Rebellion in 1909, where the Nicaraguan president, Jose Santos Zelaya of the Liberal Party, faced opposition from the Conservative Party, led by Governor Juan Jose Estrada of Bluefields, who received support from the U.S. government as a result of American entrepreneurs providing financial assistance to Estrada's rebellion in the hopes of gaining economic concessions after the rebellion's victory. Of course, it's all about money. At that time...
How long do you think our jaws would be on the floor if we were just like reading one of these and we're like halfway through, and then the United States invaded such and such because they were worried the people were struggling? Like, they would just bring the whole show to a screeching halt. We'd have to like, hold on.
Oh, and then the United States got the dictator out of power and put in a really good socialist leader who helped the people.
He's a really good guy. Yeah.
We would both be like, I'd be like, I read that wrong. I must have read something wrong. Like my computer's broken. So at that time, the United States had a limited military presence in Nicaragua, having only one patrolling U.S. Navy ship off the coast of Bluefields, allegedly to protect the lives and interests of American citizens who live there. Sure it was. Well,
could you imagine if the U.S. put a battleship outside of every country where an American citizen was hanging out?
Yeah. I mean, I live at the beach here. I don't see any battleships off of the coast of where El Tunco and El Zontes are, where I
Graham,
surf.
Your protectorate battleship is on its way. You just got there. Give them a minute.
If the United States said, Grant, we're going to send a battleship down to protect you and other American surfers, I'd be like, we're good. Why don't you guys stay up in San Diego? We don't need you.
Your protection generally ends with blood and screaming, so I'm fine.
No one's hassling me at all here. It's kind of great, actually. I don't want anything from the United States at all. Leave me alone. How can I say that? Two Americans, Leonard Gross and Leroy Cannon, were captured and indicted for allegedly joining the rebellion and laying mines. The Zelaya then ordered the execution of the two Americans, which severed the U.S. relations. So again, Americans were interfering, and and some Americans died who were interfering, who were part of the interference. And then America does what America is still doing today. Like, I mean, I don't know. Didn't just 3 service members just die because Biden is putting our service members back in the middle of more of these ridiculous wars? The State Department.
What do you want? You want American soldiers to not be in Jordan right now? I mean, could you imagine just letting Jordan do Jordan things? Come on.
I know the audacity that these countries want to govern themselves the way they want to be governed is just ludicrous. Because we need to go fist our democracy up in everybody's.
What are we going to leave Iraq after Iraq's asked us to leave 17 times?
I know. I mean, look at all the great freedom we brought to Afghanistan after 20 years and $3.5 trillion. Like, look at that. It's just so much democracy. We've been shooting all over the world.
I love that we still have troops in Iraq while they're like, we really want you to leave. And we're like, so you want us here, right? We really want you to leave. So I'm getting is there a bit of strife over us? No, you need to get the hell out. So you're saying a few more years is what you're saying?
Few more years? No, like go. Like you have a week to pack up and leave. Oh, so sign a 10-year deal?
10 years it is. Okay. Not a day over 10 years.
And then how can we stir it up? Like, the State Department was like hoping this was what America hopes for, is that, Americans get injured or wounded or die so that we have to go save Americans. It's
well, I'm also very suspicious, just to throw in some suspicion here without any evidence of this, but that U.S. soldiers are killed by the Iran-backed militia that even the Pentagon says they have no evidence of it being Iran. But they're killed 7 days after Iran inks a 20-year oil deal with Russia. Like it seems like it's also very convenient for Israel because Israel wants to drag the U.S. further into the conflicts in the region because they are starting to realize that's the only way that they'll succeed in their genocidal intents. So it's a little convenient.
Yeah. It's always weird that there's always some incident right after an oil deal that doesn't benefit the United States goes down. Like it's whenever some guy, whenever a leader goes, oh, I'm taking us off the petrodollar. It's like, oh, suddenly that guy becomes a terrorist. Weird. He just is a terrorist.
And he violates human rights like the morning after. Oh, one of my favorite was like the day, this is several years ago, the day after Pakistan agreed to do oil deals with China in Chinese currency instead of U.S. petrodollar. The day after, the U.S. added Pakistan to the list of countries violating religious freedoms.
Yeah, the day after.
They just realized. What is it about religion?
Yeah. It's like, remember when Saddam Hussein was our ally in the 80s during the Iran-Iraq war? And then suddenly he became a terrorist when he said, I'm getting off the petrodollar.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah,
weird.
So bizarre.
Bizarre. So after these two guys were killed down there, the forces of Emiliano Chamorro Vargas and Nicaraguan General Juan Estrada, each leading conservative revolts against Zeleya's government, had captured 3 small towns on the border with Costa Rica and were forming open rebellion in the capital of Managua. U.S. naval warships that had been waiting off Mexico and Costa Rica moved into position. Oh, boy. So that's when a bunch of cruisers, battleships, whatever, came in on the Atlantic coast near Panama with 700 Marines. This is where I would imagine Smedley Butler comes in because he was a Marine general.
What year are we in now?
This is December 12th, 1909.
1909.
Then 280 Blue Jackets and the gunboat USS Yorktown with 155 soldiers arrived in Corinto, Nicaragua to join the gunboat USS Vicksburg with her crew of 155, allegedly to protect American citizens and property on the Pacific coast of Nicaragua. So even Wikipedia knows there's bullshit here.
even Wikipedia is like, come on.
Allegedly, like Wikipedia is like a defense attorney that knows it has a guilty client, like, Your Honor, everybody sleeps with a gun in their hand that has blood on it and is clearly a weapon was discharged, but we don't know why that bullet left the chamber, but maybe the bullet wanted to leave.
Also, Wikipedia is far more honest the farther back you go in history. Like this is 1909, so they're like, the U.S. was up to some shit. Whereas if you talk about like last year, they're like, Juan Guaido is the president of Venezuela, folks. I don't understand why you can't get that.
It literally, it starts, I believe, with like JFK. That's when they start going like,
the cutoff.
That's the cutoff. Anything pre-JFK, they're like, yeah, we didn't do something. And then JFK, it's like Lee Harvey Oswald was a lone gunman and a crazy person who had bullets that defied the laws of physics. Next story. Good night.
Yeah. The JFK assassination page on Wikipedia is 3 sentences long. He was walking in Dallas and a dude shot him.
Yeah. And Jack Ruby died a hero. Good night.
Jack Ruby, the owner of the local strip club connections to the mob, just wanted to protect America.
Right. He was just an angry mob strip club owner. That really believed in.
Patriot.
Patriot mob.
You know that resume. Mob, strip club owner, patriot, gunman.
Gunman. Who also has a dossier with the CIA. Anyway, stop asking questions. Back to Nicaragua. So then Zelina resigned in December 14th, 1909, and his handpicked successor, Jose Mediz, was elected by unanimous vote of the Liberal Nicaraguan National Assembly on December 20, 1909. U.S. Secretary of State Philander C. Knox admonished that the United States would not resume diplomatic relations with Nicaragua until Mediz demonstrated that he was a responsible government prepared to make reparations for the wrongs done to American citizens. And by American citizens, let's be real clear here. These have to be like corporate owners, like
corporate
business
owners. Yeah.
Yeah.
You took our bananas.
Yeah. So when America sends battleship to protect its citizens, those citizens are usually CEOs or billionaires. Those citizens get protected.
Listen, boys, we got to protect our bananas. All right. We're sending them down there with a couple of battleships should do it.
Yep. Don't want those bananas going bad. So we got to send some battleships down.
If we don't protect our bananas, what will people slip on in a comical way?
Where was it? Zelaya was granted a request, asylum by Mexico, which was granted, and he was escorted by armed guards to the Mexican gunboat, and that ended that dude. He just went away.
By the way, I'm now remembering, if you go back a year or something in the annals of government secrets, not annals, the annals of government secrets, you will find an episode on like the massacres by the United Fruit Company and Chiquita.
Yeah,
in Nicaragua.
And this is, again, like a lot of our government secrets, a lot of them are interwoven and connect. So this is when then Smedley Butler joins the story. On May 27th, Smedley Butler arrived on the coast of Nicaragua with 250 Marines for the purpose of providing security in Bluefields. The U.S. Secretary of State condemned Zelaya's actions, favoring Estrada. Zelaya succumbed to the U.S. political pressure and fled the country, leaving Mediz as his successor. Mediz, in turn, had to face an advance by the reinvigorated Eastern rebel forces, which ultimately led to his resignation. On August of 1910, Juan Estrada became president of Nicaragua with the official recognition of the United States. Puppet. That's when we put in a puppet.
Pop in. The expression inside our government is "pop in the puppet."
Pop in the puppet.
They love that one. They find that so funny. But CIA behind closed doors. There you go. It's time to pop it.
It's time for a CIA puppet. The Estrada administration allowed President William Taft and Secretary of State to apply the dollar diplomacy or dollars for bullets policy.
This sounds good.
The goal was to undermine European financial strength in the region. So again, it's just some sort of colonial rich guy battle in a country that has resources.
Yeah.
So the Europeans were threatening American interests to construct a canal in the isthmus and also to protect American private investment in the development of Nicaragua's natural resources. Shocking, all shocking.
The development of natural resources. Don't you love that sentence? I believe that means the stealing and getting rid of natural resources.
Yeah, and killing anyone who gets in the way of the United States getting these resources.
How amazing is it that we've successfully fallen for the propaganda where when you cut down trees, that's developing them? I mean, what is the development of the trees?
Again, it goes back to the thing that is the through line or basis of this show is, why weren't we taught any of this? How come we never learned? How come, I was in my 40s when I first heard about who Smedley Butler was. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that is a deliberate cult-like propaganda that is fed to the American people.
To
that
get
we're the
this
good
kind
guys.
of history in high school, you had to go to like a back alley behind a movie theater somewhere, and
Yeah.
there was a guy with a trench coat, and he had like Howard Zinn books in there, and he'd be like, "Man, you want to learn about what really went down in the Banana Wars?"
Look at it
And
right here.
yeah, it was ugly.
And that guy would have told you about Smedley Butler, and you go, all right, this guy's nuts.
Yeah,
You know,
this guy's crazy.
that's how they did it. So this is when, and I'll wrap this up because this is when, and this is the thing, to Smedley Butler's credit, he realized somewhere along the way, this ain't right. Like maybe when he retired, maybe when he was doing it, somewhere along the way, he went,
at some point, clearly it was when he was retired that he wrote the books and started touring the country and everything. And I think I've mentioned this before on the show. I actually got a thank you email from his, I think, great grandson, maybe, for thanking me for keeping his name in the, on the TVs and the interwebs, and keeping people talking about the great stuff he did after he was out. And he is the most decorated, to this day, he's one of the most decorated Marines to ever live.
Anytime you can educate an American on who Smedley Butler was, you've done a good thing.
Yeah.
Like, if all this show ever does, and the only thing your show or my show and this show ever do is teach people about Fred Hampton and Smedley Butler, we've done our jobs. You know what I mean? That's all it does. That we've done our jobs. So then there was like a civil war that started to break out, and that was in 1910 and 1911, and then in 1912 is when we flat out just occupied the country. At the recommendation of Nicaraguan president, a landing force of 100 Blue Jackets was dispatched from Annapolis to the capital to protect American citizens. And that's basically when it started. That's when we started sending all of these troops in 1912. By the morning of September 22nd of 1912, 2 battalions of Marines and an artillery battery under Major Smedley Butler entered Grenada, Nicaragua, and that's when we just kept sending more and more people, and we just flat out occupied the country. And there was a couple more civil wars and stuff like that, but that basically is the
history of the banana split.
The history of the banana split. Fa la la, fa la la la. Remember that cartoon? 1 banana, 2 banana, 3 banana, 4. We'll go into a country and take more. Send the Marines.
Loved it. I love that cartoon.
So that's Government Secret segment number 1, another illegal occupation. And now segment number 2, how Lee's gonna ruin more of our memories.
Time to ruin some childhood memories. Some sweet, positive childhood memories.
You've killed all my like cop show detective stuff. You've ruined that. You've ruined so many things.
I've ruined so many sweet, nice things.
Yes.
Such as the beautiful state of Israel. So here's how this topic came about is Netflix has a documentary out that I assume is being, I know it can depend on your filter bubble, but I assume is being promoted to most people. Brand new documentary on the hit 1980s song, We Are the World. And, I watched like a couple of minutes and I was like, oh yeah, that thing. I remember that. I was like 5 when it came out, but it was still rippling when I was, 7 and 8. And so I remember I was like, oh, and my mom was really into it. And it was like Michael Jackson and all these people. And and then I remember like the lyrics are, we are the world, we are the children. And it was all done to feed hungry people. And I was like, oh, that's nice. That's beautiful. That's positive. And then that part of my brain goes, there must be something bad about this. Like,
well, that's what this show does. That's what this show does. And doing both of our independent shows and this show, we both have this like, It couldn't have been all that good. Like we just go.
I was like, so they raised millions of dollars to feed hungry people in Africa, and I'm like, there's gotta be like not that they, and I'll get more into this, but not that the musicians knew or had any part in what was wrong about it, but like, how do you end up with one of the biggest songs of all time? Almost, I think it's entirely American musicians, and feeding Africa. It's like the U.S. government wouldn't just like facilitate something on that largest scale unless it served a purpose. Like, it just wouldn't yeah, they could put it out. They could still record a thing if they were feeding, people in Iran, but I don't know that it would get that much traction or be promoted, or there's got to be something going on here. And so I looked it up, did the research, and in case anyone needs reminding, this is a 1985 song called "We Are the World" that is to this day the 9th biggest single of all time. It probably at the time was, first or second or something, biggest single of all time. Let's see, here's the people involved in it. It was co-written by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, but the singers included Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, Kenny Rogers, Tina Turner, Billy Joel, Michael Jackson, Diana Ross, Willie Nelson, Bruce Springsteen, Kenny Loggins, Steve Perry, Daryl Hall, Huey Lewis, Cyndi Lauper, Kim Carnes, Bob Dylan, Ray Charles, and then somehow batting way above it, way out of his league, Dan Aykroyd showed up. But
how did one of the Blues Brothers get on that lineup?
How did Dan Aykroyd? And you can see in the video, like, he has a look on his face, like, how the shit did I get here?
Like, could you imagine if there was this lineup of musicians and then like you or I were asked to be in there? You'd be like, what do you, I don't sing. What do you want me to?
It totally looks like it was like that list of singers and then Carrot Top was standing off to the side.
They're singing this beautiful music and then "We Are the World," and then Carrot Top's just there like, "Wow, this could be a shoehorn," or whatever, and wears it as a hat.
And he blows the horn that he has in his trunk. Yeah. So, got all these stars together. Of course, it's going to be a massive hit. You guys know the lyrics. We are the children. If you care enough for the living. So it's all about caring and helping people. It ultimately, let's see, raised where'd it go? Ultimately raised $80 million, which is $214 million today for humanitarian aid in Africa. But most of that, if not all of it, was for Ethiopia. And so I looked up what was going on in Ethiopia at the time.
Oh God, diamond mines or uranium. What was it? Oil, what?
No, it wasn't. As far as I can tell, it was not a resource. It was simply the fact that the United States wanted to keep them out of the hands of the Soviet Union. Well, actually, that's only partly true. Ethiopia is perfectly situated in Africa, the Horn of Africa, to be a pivotal piece of Africa. It's not one of the landlocked countries. It is one of the most important areas of Africa for U.S. empire. So there's that as well, but it was less about stealing something on the ground and more about keeping it out of the hands of the Soviet Union. Or by hands, I simply mean being an ally of the Soviet Union.
Right.
So let me read some. This is by Gail Smith, Middle East Research and Information Project. And this was written in 87. So this is the famine, et cetera, is still ongoing at this point. But in Africa, drought and war have forced huge numbers of peasants to sell off their animals and tools and abandon the land on which they depend, thus bringing local economies to a standstill. Grain yields in Africa declined by 1/3 per hectare over the last decade. Food production down 15% since 1981. 1 out of every 5 Africans now depends on food aid. Interest payments on international loans now consume $15 billion per year. So the rich countries are collecting billions from these countries that are starving to death because they've given them loans and they want their interest rates, their interest money paid. The continent's industrial base is functioning at only 1/3 capacity. The incidence of famine among Africa's rural producers has in turn brought national economies to a halt. Under the Reagan administration, economic development revolves around policy reforms designed to bolster private sector development. So that, of course, is another aspect of it. It's not just keep them out of the hands of the Soviet Union. It's promote the private sector. If you're going to develop your country, if you're going to succeed, it's got to be done with corporations. It shouldn't be done with people working together.
No.
On his January 1987 trip to Africa, Secretary of State George Shultz spoke of a new partnership between the U.S. and Black Africa. That's what he called it, Black Africa.
Really? He said it.
Yeah, he said, and Black Africa.
And we're going to do some, we want to have diplomatic ties with Ching-Chong, China. And like what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're not the most politically correct folks, I guess.
Weird that Secretary of State under Reagan in the 80s wasn't a little more soft with his diplomatic touch.
Schultz.
Schultz.
Partnership between the U.S. And by the way, every time anyone signs up for a partnership with the United States, they've got like a gun next to their head. They're yeah, I'd love to be your friend. I really would. and they're like, you just slowly see it come into frame, just the barrel, right? As they're like, this is going to work out great for us.
We're really excited. All of us here. We're so happy.
Partnership between the U.S. and Africa based on a shared vision of free enterprise as the basis for economic development. Now, you can read free enterprise as capitalism, as corporatism. According to the World Bank, 22 of 34 low-income countries in Africa targeted for assistance. I like that they use the word targeted. They pointed their assistance gun at them.
Everything is war with the United States. Just they launched an assistance program from the fiery depths of a
You see the red laser pointer dot of assistance slowly circle around your forehead.
It's the good old American assistance.
Let's see. Targeted for assistance by the Reagan administration have initiated U.S.-sponsored economic reforms, which always benefits the rich and harms the poor, including withdrawals of government subsidies, devaluation of local currencies, and decreased support for public sector initiatives. 22 of 34 low-income countries had their currencies devalued and their public sector initiatives decreased or collapsed.
Thanks to the United States.
In order to get quote-unquote aid from the United States, in order to get billions of dollars from the World Bank and America and et cetera.
It's like we're worse than a drug dealer. Like,
because a drug dealer doesn't say, I'm gonna fuck up your whole neighborhood. Like,
right. And a drug dealer doesn't lie to you and say, this drug's going to make your community better and it's going to give your kids better schools and all that stuff. Your drug dealer just goes, this is going to get you high. It is going to get you messed up. So if you want to buy it. And America comes in and goes, our America's help. Like, is there anything
roughly,
worse?
A drug dealer is roughly 1 billion times more honest than the United States.
Yes. Is there anything worse than American help? Like,
no, it's like gonorrhea of the AIDS of the herpes. It is awful on top of awful.
Great analogy. Now we all have to visualize it. Okay. So
I thought it was a good analogy. I read it in Dr. Seuss' book yesterday.
Dr. Seuss. I will not wear a condom on a boat. I will not wear a condom on a boat.
In Angola, Mozambique, and Ethiopia, U.S. policy aims at establishing some leverage, and that's when you get like those are the more honest terms. I mean, because this article's being honest, but this is all done to give the U.S. leverage to get what they want out of countries. Any aid the U.S. ever sends, even when it's coming from Tina Turner and Dan Aykroyd, it's used by the U.S. as leverage. Over the country's broader political orientation and especially their international alliances. Once America's key ally in Africa, Ethiopia, and I'm not going to, by the way, get into, there's definitely an interesting story to be told of the entire past 100 years of Ethiopia and the various wars and things. And we don't have time for all that. So, and I can't even say I understand it all, but once America's key ally in Africa, Ethiopia is likewise a logical candidate for a Reagan effort at counter-revolution. But in Ethiopia, perhaps because there is no opposition force like Renamo or UNITA, American attempts to regain access have meant dealing directly with the central government. So this is an interesting point, is that the government at the time was a Marxist-Leninist military government. And that seemed, I don't know who's telling the truth, but seemed pretty brutal. And in most places, that would be the type of government the U.S. would try and get out. They don't care that they're brutal, but they would want them out because they're Marxist-Leninist. However, in this case, the U.S. was willing to work with them because it seemed like that was their shot at keeping the Soviet Union at bay. So whereas the U.S. would normally coup something like that, instead they ended up trying to buy them off, basically, it seems. Between 1970... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, those are two great options. Either couped or bought off into some horrific stimulus plan that destroys your country. Those are your options.
Yeah, and as everyone can read in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which is one of those books you should buy in the back alley behind the movie theater. Everyone needs to read that book. But his point is, like, first they go in and they, I can't remember if buying them off is step one. I think it might be. Step one is try to buy these governments off to do what the U.S. wants. Step two is to try and coup them in a lighter way. And then step three, if all else fails, is straight up assassination.
Great. It's a great flow chart.
It's a friendly flow chart. Between 1977 and 1983, U.S. policy towards Ethiopia was shaped in reaction to the presence of the Soviet Union. This period was marked by dalliances with Ethiopia's hostile neighbors, Sudan and Somalia. The famine that struck in 1984 provided the opportunity to see. That's the thing, is the U.S. sees a famine, sees people starving to death, children starving to death, and they see dollar signs in their eyes. They go, oh, we can use this. This is a tool.
Yeah. Their first instinct is never, gee, how do we help these kids? It's, hey, how do we use this for some sort of strategic advantage? Like,
right.
Awful.
Right. And that's why when I was, watching some of the We Are the World documentary, I was like, the U.S. had to be using this somehow, or using this as a weapon or a tool or something. The 1984 provided the opportunity to intervene more directly in Ethiopia's internal affairs. Although the administration repeatedly assured the media that, quote, a starving child knows no politics. God, doesn't that sound like Reagan? Can you see that garbage just spraying out of Reagan's face?
Ooh.
A starving child knows no politics.
Oh, but we do.
But
we're going to exploit this kid.
We do, and we can use that starving child as a gun. It set up an interagency task force on the Africa famine, comprising representatives of the Department of Defense, the CIA, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, AID, and the Department of Agriculture. Anytime you have those folks in a room, the main goal is to get that kid fed. Goal number one.
It's like we have a homeless problem. Let's call the NRA.
We have there's 12 kids who desperately need medicine. Do you have any assassins at the FBI we might be able to?
Do you have any hitmen lying around that could help us out with these kids in foster care?
Do you have any guys with neck tattoos recently freed from maximum security prisons who started working with the CIA?
Yeah.
Are they anyone who might be able to bring these kids a sandwich?
Yeah. Anybody looking for work?
The task force headed by a general, which, you know, anytime you put a general in charge of a feed people task force.
Oh, God.
He had, you know, where they have the gold stars and everything on the shoulders. He's got little pieces of ham and bacon and stuff. It's just like, because he wants to feed people.
I just like.
I think we just hit Graham's silent moment of the
I
podcast.
can't.
We just hit Graham's awkward, pained silence.
I just figure like a fucking Black Hawk helicopter, and they're just like shooting hot dogs out of a 60 caliber machine gun at starving kids. Like, this is their solution to fix it. Just like, eat these, you know.
You realize how much better the U.S. military would be if that's what it was.
Hot dogs.
Just that. I mean, the U.S. military has in the past been called sausage guns, I feel like, but.
Oh, God.
Task force headed by General Julius Becton would play a critical role in determining who ate and who starved in Africa's Horn. U.S. economic support for Ethiopia, the temporary convergence of U.S. interests with those of Addis Ababa, and Washington's search for a viable anti-communist opposition force reflect a refining of Reagan doctrine tactics in this interest, deciding who eats and who starves. And you'll notice that in the We Are the World song, at no point do they say in the lyrics, you know, hopefully this will help the U.S. empire continue to control Africa.
That's just the lost verse that they.
Yeah, there's got to be a lost verse that's like, if you care for hegemony.
It's true, we make a brighter day, just crushing other societies that don't play ball with us today, or whatever.
If you care for harmony and hegemony.
Harmony and hegemony, they come together like perfect hand by hand on the sidewalk, we will, why can't we? Yeah.
And believe it or not, this song we've just created is actually less painful than the We Are the World propaganda. Just barely. It's close.
I mean, it is tight. Really tight.
Tight race.
Tight race.
Making Ethiopia the European Economic Community's #1 aid recipient in Africa, and it became the #1 aid recipient, and the country, because it was one of the most useful countries in Africa, because it was the Horn of Africa, access to that waterway, access to the Middle East, access to so many of Africa's resources. So basically, it became the #1 recipient of aid because it was the most useful for Western powers. And the country, so remember this article is from 1987. The country is scheduled to receive more World Bank concessional aid by 1990 than any other country. World Bank, always there to help out.
Them and the IMF are doing the Lord's work.
But the United States took serious economic actions against the Ethiopian government following its alliance with the Soviet Union, using government repression of domestic opponents as an excuse. So basically, there were plenty of human rights abuses going on in Ethiopia. The U.S. didn't care until Ethiopia aligned with the Soviet Union. And then all of a sudden the U.S. said, human rights abuses. And
How convenient.
Took various actions against Ethiopia.
Right.
It now appears that the decrease in food assistance to Ethiopia, this is in the early 1980s. Also, it apparently, I think what they're referring to was also in Carter's presidency, where
Right.
at least to some degree, and this doesn't mean the U.S. empire wasn't still the U.S. empire, but to some degree, they started to link aid to some level of human rights. But I couldn't actually figure out whether that was just like when it was convenient for the U.S., like, oh, it's human rights. It now appears that the decrease in food assistance to Ethiopia and the failure to provide relief until the famine had reached catastrophic proportions was primarily a means of positioning the U.S. for what was to follow. In the coming years, stated former Secretary of Agriculture John Block upon his inauguration in 1980, in the coming years, food aid will prove to be the most powerful weapon of the U.S., unquote.
That's evil. That's pure evil.
Straight up said the quiet part loud.
Wow.
Literally, food aid will be our biggest weapon.
I'm amazed Kissinger wasn't somehow involved in this.
Oh, no. Kissinger was advisory through all of this. Kissinger was in the wings, grumbling.
You can starve them to death. This will get you more power.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows? It may have been his idea. I bet you We Are the World was his idea. He was like, what if they all sang about it?
I'm friends with Dan Aykroyd.
Well, the idea behind it came from Harry Belafonte, who reached out to Quincy Jones, who then reached out to Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie. And so they're like the origin of it. Now who went to Harry Belafonte and said, I think you should help facilitate the U.S. Using famine as a weapon, using food aid as a weapon.
My guess is, these artists were just like, hey, let's do something. Let's try to help.
Oh, no, absolutely. No.
And like Americans, so many Americans like, hey, let's help. Let's do something. Well, we'll sing a song and we'll raise money for it. Yay. And then the State Department goes, yes, we'll come in and use this for evil. It's just like, there's probably been a meeting at the CIA or the Pentagon on like, how can we, weaponize Girl Scout cookies and, use it or something. Like they just want to turn everything into an op.
Well, and even if, let's say Harry Belafonte just came up with the idea on his own, looking at other efforts to help people. But a few things. One is he probably came up with the idea as we were being told about the horrible famine in Africa. Why were we then in 1984 being told about the horrible famine, where even though there'd been famine before that? Well, we were being told about it right then because it was useful as a tool, as a weapon for the U.S. government. So that's part of it. But then beyond that, once this thing started to come together, and we're talking all of the biggest, stars, many of the biggest stars in the world, all coming together. Once that happened, I think the U.S. They probably met with various, I don't mean necessarily higher up, but various members of the U.S. government and said, well, where exactly should this food aid go? And the U.S. government said, here, here, and here, the places that it's useful to them. So, that's like the best case scenario where it's not, I don't think Michael Jackson was like, how do I get these? No. How do I destroy these parts of Africa?
I don't think so. I think, they just know how to use celebrities because celebrities aren't like tied in to the CIA, or some of them are probably, but most of them aren't.
In 1985, the U.S. entered the battle in Ethiopia from a position of strength, and in that year made Ethiopia the largest recipient of aid emergency assistance in Africa. The bulk international assistance entered the first pipeline. So this gets into a little bit of where the aid. So we're talking, again, hundreds of millions of dollars, equivalent in today's money, and where it was going.
Froze up.
I froze up.
And now you're back.
Awesome. I was hoping I'd be back. So this gets into where some of the aid went, and I'll try and speed it up here. But and it, despite they say that despite the 1984 estimate that less than 3% of all famine victims in Ethiopia were in the government area, most of the famine victims were in the rebel areas. The bulk of international assistance was going to the government areas. So you're sending all this famine aid mainly to the places that are not having the famine.
Great.
Because the U.S. wanted to manipulate the government, wanted to have them as an ally, so therefore give the aid money and whatever else to them.
It just keeps getting worse. All right. Well, we're running out of time.
All right. And it says, while celebrities visited the urban centers of northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, the Ethiopian military regularly bombed truck convoys moving towards the rebel zones. Basically, the government is bombing any aid that actually goes to the main areas of famine. In January 1985, the Ethiopian authorities seized the relief ship and its contents and stopped it from getting to those areas. Media attention in the U.S. focused almost exclusively on the Ethiopian government's Relief and Rehabilitation Commission when discussing the international relief effort. The practical effect of the silence was devastating. While an estimated 50% or more of the total famine victims resided in guerrilla-held territory, 10 times more aid was provided to the government-held zones.
Sweet.
Seeing how much more I have left. Just probably 5 minutes. A secret White House report of May 1984 shows that the U.S. government was well aware that a massive disaster was in the works in both guerrilla and government-held territory. The National Security Council, which maintains the right of final approval on all allocations of relief aid to Ethiopia, did not see U.S. assistance as an opportune until some 5 months later in November 1984. So again, they're letting the famine get worse and worse until they find a way to effectively use it for their ends. During 1985-86, Ethiopia received over $1 billion in famine-related assistance. The U.S. was the largest contributor. Of this assistance, over 80% was allocated to the government, despite the fact that it had physical access to less than half of the famine's victims. All right. Here's the last part about this. Part is actually they mention We Are the World. At the onset of the famine, the U.S. government came under vocal attack for its miserly behavior towards Africa's starving, and in particular for stalling aid to Ethiopia. By the time the famine had been declared over by international agencies, the public mood became one of self-congratulation, reflected in the lyrics of We Are the World and the words of the congressional report. Congratulating us, the U.S. and humanity, that a major human catastrophe was avoided. In fact, an estimated 1 million people starved to death in the guerrilla-held areas of Tigray and Eritrea due to a lack of assistance, with millions more forced off their land by migration and resettlement. Food was the weapon, and Washington was the quartermaster. The Ethiopian government was able to force hundreds of thousands of peasants out of guerrilla-held areas and into either government zones or neighboring countries with considerable assistance from the West.
The end, kids. Sleep tight.
We are the world. We are the children.
Oh, just it never ends how the different ways America's awful. It's just exploiting, artists who are, have hearts of gold and are trying to do the right thing and help people out, and Americans who just want to help. That's America at our core. The American people, we just want to help. We don't want to make things better. That's what we want to do as Americans, right?
I know, and it's so disgusting and so cynical. Of course, I had to be cynical to even realize this. Like, hey, they can't just be doing good,
right?
But it's so disgusting that. Again, I think this was a genuine effort by these musicians. I think it was a genuine effort by a lot of people involved in trying to get aid in general to Africa. I think that they were responding to the footage on their TV of people starving. Yeah. And yet all of that is either being used by the United States. So maybe they are getting food to starving people, but they're using it in a political manner. Or in the worst of it, they're actually denying starving people food because, again, it's useful for U.S. hegemonic aims. And as we can see, this goes back decades and decades and decades. And
Thank you, Alex Das Leby. Government secret schedule is like playing D&D and rolling a D20. Maybe replaying online could be a Patreon tier. Yes.
Yes, trying to find our schedule is really the best way to listen or take in government secrets is a month after the fact on the podcast at your own convenience.
Just at your own convenience, watch or download the episodes.
Never try and catch us. It's like, it's like trying to catch your neighborhood streaker. Everyone there was you hear these rumors of the naked guy running through.
We've done this show now from 1, 2, 3 different countries and an island. So, and 2 different islands. So we've really, there's a lot of
12 different time zones.
Literally 12 different time zones. There was a time where we were 12 hours apart when we did the show.
Right. Graham had one eye open because it was 6 a.m. I had one eye closed because I was half asleep at 12 p.m. 12 a.m.
So, but thank you for tuning in, guys. And yes, I got another show to do at 3:00. So we can go. Can you got time for a Patreon? But we got to make it really quick. We got to bang out a.
I can listen. The speed is up to you. I'm just sitting there.
All right. Well, folks, thanks for watching. Go to grahamelwood.com. Again, I'm doing the Orange Pill podcast at 4:00 Eastern, which is in a little over an hour. Or a little less than an hour, 1:00 Pacific with Max Kaiser and our guest Lena. So if you don't know much about Bitcoin, watch the show. If you know a lot about Bitcoin, you'll love the show. So check that out. And then Lee, what do you have? Where can people find you?
I live stream 4 days a week at rumble.com/Lee Camp. And you can find all my stuff at leecamp.com.
Sweet. Folks, and go to patreon.com/government secrets. We'll be there in about 1 or 2 minutes doing a bonus segment, which you can join and support our show.
See you there.
This has been Government Secrets, episode 148. Nicaragua being helped by America, and We Are the World is another awful scam. See you later.